Howdy, partner. Hello, and welcome back to the only YouTube channel on the internet. Don't look that up. Don't look it up. Just don't do it. And today, I'm going to be sharing my super important and special reaction to Punk Hazard in One Piece. There's a chance you may have noticed that it's only been a couple of days since I posted my Fishman Island reaction, and that's because Punk Hazard was fucking amazing, and it was very fast-paced, so I essentially read the entire thing in like 2 extended sittings. First things first, I'm gonna do a short little spoiler-free reaction area where I just share my general thoughts and feelings without getting too specific, just in case on the off chance someone is watching this and they don't want any spoilers. I will let you know when we're switching over to the spoiler part. So, Punk Hazard. My God, this arc went hard. This arc was fantastic. On the heels of Fishman Island, I wasn't really sure narratively where this story was going to go because it felt like Fishman Island was a self-contained story that kind of left a couple of dangling threads, and I wasn't sure exactly where all of it was leading. And a lot of times between arcs, there's like this thread that kind of ties them together, and I didn't feel like that because they get to this island without spoilers in a fashion that is pretty much by accident. And so I was super like blank slate going into this. I did not know what to expect, and I wasn't really sure where the story was going in this arc. And the first point of praise that I really want to just throw out there is that this arc sets up so many mysteries in a very short span of time. It's like in the first 10 chapters, there's like 5 or 6 things that are completely like, what is going on? What is happening? What is this person? Why is there this thing here? Like, what is going on? And they're all introduced pretty much in succession, and none of them are answered until like halfway through the arc. And at that point, you're getting more mysteries. So like this whole time, it's like this self-fulfilling like prophecy of Oda is introducing a mystery, then another one, then he solves one, and then he introduces another one, and then he solves another one, and he introduces another one on top of that, so that you're always constantly turning the page, you're always going to the next thing, because you aren't getting all the answers at once. Another really strong point in this arc is the comedy is fantastic. I feel like he's at the top of his game with the humor in this arc, and that's not something that's ever entirely missing in One Piece, but I feel like this is one of the strongest arcs in terms of the ongoing jokes that exist just within the self-contained little bubble of this story, and there's a lot of recurring jokes that are brought back that I think are just woven in excellently, and I laughed a lot while reading this arc. And just as I said with Fishman Island, Oda is a master of writing on a theme, and that is 100% present in this arc, and he does it obviously incredibly, just like he always does, and it is just perfect. I mean, the way that he brings all the themes together in this arc is just fantastic, and that's always going to be a point of praise for me when I'm talking about One Piece, but I feel like it's worth mentioning that this definitely does not disappoint on that front. But anyway, I really want to talk about specific stuff, so I'm going to get into spoiler talk now. If you, for some reason, are still listening and you haven't read this or watched this arc before, I advise you to click off. I can't imagine that there's anyone that's doing that. But anyway, on we go. So first things first, as I was talking about just a little bit ago, all the mysteries that are introduced are fantastic. I love that we see a dragon right off the bat, which was crazy. I did not think we were ever going to actually see a real dragon in this story, and I thought it was awesome. The fight against it was awesome. The island itself, the whole setting with half ice, half fire, and then you learn that it was Aokiji and Akainu, and that brings back like this piece of information that was given to us in the past arc that could have just been kind of like, you know, almost erased off and just been like, oh, well, we didn't need that. But of course, it's Oda, and he always finds a way to bring that stuff back, so I thought that was fantastic, and it just had this really cool element to it where the island had its own sort of living, breathing life that incorporated itself into the story and that affected our characters in the narrative in a really exciting way in a lot of times. And I mean, right off the bat, you get the whole mystery with the kids too, and then there's the chopped up samurai guy from Wano, which is another thing I really want to talk about, is that this is like the 3rd or 4th time they've talked about Wano, and it's getting me really excited to get there because Oda has explicitly said in one of the question corners that that is a future arc, and I am very excited for that. But the biggest thing, the biggest thing that happens at the beginning of this arc is when Trafalgar Law shows back up. Because when he shows up, for one, it's a shock, because it's like, why is this guy on this island? What is he doing with this, with whatever person is here? Because at that point, you don't know who Caesar is. And then he has one of the best fights in One Piece. I'm gonna throw that out there. I think this is one of the best fights when he fights Smoker. That is one of the most badass moments in my life, when he like expands his domain and then he just kind of, all the soldiers are charging at him and then he just puts his hand out and like flicks his fingers up and the ship, dude, oh my, that shit was awesome. Law is like, he was already like enigmatic and like interesting from the time we saw him in Sabaody and the fact that he saved Luffy. But now, dude, he is a badass. He is so cool. His power seems a little overpowered, but he is, I'm really, really intrigued by him, and I want to know more about him. I'm going to talk about him a lot more throughout this reaction, but just his introduction and his fight against Smoker, oh, fantastic, 10 out of 10. I was so hype reading those. And then he ends up switching all the Straw Hats around and having them like switch bodies with each other, which is one of the high points of comedy, is that the way that everyone gets switched around. I mean, it's so perfect that Sanji ended up in Nami's body, and there was some really funny stuff that came out of there. And you know, as I said earlier, once all this stuff gets introduced, once Law is there, and once all the mysteries are kind of set up, this arc, I mean, it just goes from 0 to 100 basically from the moment that they step foot on the island, and it really does not let up on the gas pedal at any point. This is a very high octane arc. There is action constantly. There is constantly new questions being introduced, and it's just so great the way that as soon as all these conflicts are set up, boom, the Straw Hats are separated. Boom, they have obstacles that they need to overcome. Boom, they have enemies they need to fight, and they just kind of go headlong into it. And like, it felt oddly like Enies Lobby to me. I don't know if that's like a crazy comparison, but it felt like they're thrown into this situation where there's already so many things in place for them to interact with and to, overcome. And they encounter all those things within like 7 or 8 chapters. It's crazy how fast things take off. And as soon as everyone's separated, some people are off on one side of the island, some people are off on the other side of the island, and then the big conflict already starts. As soon as G5 comes in, and all 3 groups kind of meet in one spot right outside the facility. And I love when Caesar he's like unveiling himself and he's doing his whole villain speech. And this is after, I need to go back for a second. I need to talk about something else. But this is after they make their alliance up in the snow, when Law and Luffy make their alliance. But Caesar is like, he's giving a whole villain speech, and Luffy does not let him finish his speech. He's just in the middle of a sentence, and Luffy's like trying to tackle him off the thing, which is so funny. But let me backtrack real quick. When Law offers an alliance with Luffy, that was one of the biggest jaw drop moments for me, because that was probably the last thing I was expecting to come out of his mouth. And it, like, I still don't know what's going on exactly. I don't know what his master plan is. I don't know what his intentions are. I don't really understand why this alliance exists. I have like hints and pieces of like why he wanted Luffy to, I mean, I know why he wanted Luffy to capture Caesar, but like, why Luffy specifically? Like, what is going on? Why does he want this? Why does he want to take down Kaido so bad? I just don't know, but I am so interested. And this is, I feel like, setting up a much larger conflict that is going to be resolved, far down the line. I feel like I'm bouncing all over the place with all the things I'm talking about. I'm trying to be as linear as possible, but my mind is not working that way right now. But going forward on this whole Pirate Alliance thing, we find out afterwards, much farther down the line, they're captured, and they're, after they have a fight where Caesar like suffocates all of them or whatever with his gas powers. They're all captured, and we find out that Doflamingo is Law's like former boss. He runs this, black market syndicate where he sells stuff to, high-paying people in the New World, and Law used to work for him, which is how Law knew Virgo, who is basically a turncoat, two-faced asshole who used to run, or still runs G5 as a vice admiral. Doflamingo has been so interesting to me ever since his big villain monologue in Marineford, and he was introduced, I think, way back when in like Water 7, like during a meeting of the minds. Essentially, he showed up, and I have been intrigued by him ever since then. So I am very excited that Doflamingo is finally showing up and actually like being super integral to the main plot, because he, out of all the 7 warlords, he's really the only one that we don't know a whole lot about yet at this point in the story. So I was very excited to find out that information, and it adds to this mystery of like, what does Law want? Like, what is his whole deal? That like, why did he used to work for Doflamingo? Like, what is his story? And I know I'm probably gonna get those answers. I'm almost certainly gonna get those answers. Dude, it's the master of this arc. This arc is so good because it introduces all of these things that it's like, and there's more for me to talk about. I'm getting really excited because this is like the thing that was like, I was just flipping pages, dude. I was just reading. I could not stop because this is my favorite part of One Piece. Just like I talked about in Fishman Island, this overarching story and the way that he weaves it in to these smaller narratives is so good, dude. It's so good. But I don't want to get too far ahead of myself because there's stuff that's within this arc that I want to talk about first, and then I'll get to all the overarching stuff later, because there's stuff I want to talk about first, because that's going to take up so much of my time once I actually really get onto it. So let me again backtrack to some other stuff. While I don't think that Caesar was an incredible villain by any stretch, I do think that his means of going about things and the way that he is able to manipulate people and his sheer brutality, the way he's willing to just sacrifice people on a whim, like, it was like honestly a little bit scary, like the way that especially just the effects of the gas, seeing how people just got like frozen solid and not knowing that they would eventually be saved, but thinking that they literally just like suffered this horrible death to this like toxic chemical warfare. Dude, that was like genuinely, that was like scarier than a lot of what the other villains have like attempted to accomplish or what they have actually done to people, at least for me. And I actually want to use this as a jumping off point to talk about the themes in this arc, because I mentioned them way back when, but I'm going to give my interpretation of the themes in this arc, because I just think that he is a master at theme, and I really love talking about it because it's just one of those things that the further you dig, the more you find, at least for me. So tying that back into Caesar and his brutality, I'm going to bring up a couple of key groups that I think tie into the themes here. Number one, all of Caesar's underlings, the people that he saved from, the explosion that he blamed on Vegapunk, and that he, pretended to save them from. And they sort of all worship Caesar as their master. They think he is this benevolent angel and that he's, can do no wrong. And Blackbeard is sort of the central figure for that, to sort of show the progression of how much he worshipped Caesar, and then as he saw the corruption and the deception, he turned on him, and he realized it was this enormous betrayal for him. It was a betrayal of his trust and a betrayal of his entire belief system for a long time. That group there is very interesting to me because of that that dichotomy there of they don't understand the true nature of this person that they call their master. And on the other hand, you look at something like G5, which is, there's the group of Marines. And the reason I'm bringing up those groups specifically is because they are very much just, everyday average Joes. They aren't special people. They are just like, they're just Marines. They're just people that were on this island. They're out of their wheelhouse around these, crazy devil fruit users and whatnot. They're just normal people who look to these figures for safety because they themselves don't stand a chance against these people. And these two groups are both deceived by their idols, by their trusting figures, because in G5, obviously, Virgo this whole time has been playing them for a fool. He actually works for Doflamingo. And this whole time, he's led them to believe that he's this great, honorable, justice-filled man, when in reality, he doesn't give a fuck about any of that stuff. And he doesn't give a fuck about them, which is a dark moment when they're all in the facility and he comes down on them and he's killing a bunch of them and they don't understand it, to the point where they literally think that it's like an imposter. They don't believe that it's him. And this is a parallel that there's no way that was on accident, where these two groups have exactly the same thing going on. And then I'm going to actually bring in a third group here. And this is something that might get further explored in the future arc, the next arc. But when Doflamingo sends his underlings to retrieve Caesar's body at the very end of the arc, I think that this also ties back into that theme of sort of deception and trust that was being built between those two groups, because the people that Doflamingo sends, they don't necessarily think that he's a great person, and they don't actually trust him all that much, but they're still willing to do his dirty deeds, and they still call him master. It is basically the polar opposite of those two groups, where instead of fully trusting him and willing to do everything because they believe that their leader is a good person when they're not actually a good person, these people are under they're under no illusions about who Doflamingo is. Like, I can't remember her name, but the chick with the wings, that's willing to basically kill herself and blow up the entire island at the end, but she gets, thwarted. Literally, like, Doflamingo is literally like, you will die for me. And she's like, yeah. Like, these people are willing to do his dirty work. They are willing to die for him, but they are under no illusions about the kind of person he is. And that makes him all the more interesting because, like, where does that charisma come from? How does he get these people to feel that way about him? Where does he get that loyalty from? And that's another, like, maybe that's not directly tied into those themes, but I just noticed it as I was reading, and I think that is so interesting. And I truly believe that was purposeful, because Oda I don't think he does anything on accident. So I was very enthralled by the work of the themes in this arc, and that's pretty much always a positive in One Piece. But he is just only getting better, man. He's too good. And I also feel like that's a direct parallel and a direct opposite to Luffy, which is something that's introduced in the arc too, where Luffy and Caesar are having this standoff, and Luffy sees how Caesar has deceived all of them and is willing to throw them away and sees them as worthless, and Luffy gets really pissed off, and Usopp even has this whole speech where he's telling them that, like, Luffy is nothing like that. He hates that shit. That's his least, like, he will never forgive that guy. And that is a direct parallel that's set up there, but I also feel like it's set up between Doflamingo and Luffy, where Luffy's crew is willing to follow him and willing to do his work for him because they love him and because they know he loves them and because they respect him, which is the complete opposite of what I have so far witnessed from Doflamingo and his underlings. I don't know if that's going to be a parallel that's further explored, but I noticed it in this arc, and I think it's worth talking about. That was a really long tangent, and I have a couple more things I want to talk about. This video is already going to be so long, but this was just such a good arc. I have so many things I need to get out there. So let me move on to the next thing. The next thing that I really want to talk about is just like this one really good moment that Zoro had when he was fighting the chick with the wings, and she was like, something's off or whatever, and then Tashigi shows up and is like, you have to take this fight seriously, like, you aren't taking it seriously because she's a woman and you don't think that she's powerful enough to fight or whatever. And Zoro, like, after Tashigi like gets injured, he walks up and the chick's like, oh yeah, like, you're not gonna be able to fight me, you weren't gonna take me seriously or whatever. And he's like, I have it almost word for word in my head. He says, have you ever met a wild beast that you could guarantee wasn't gonna bite you? Because I haven't. And then he fucking cuts her in half, dude. Oh man, that was so hype, man. That was so hype. And then she is trying to get back together because he didn't even cut her with hockey, dude. He didn't even do it. He just sliced her in half. Just fucking raw dogged her with the sword. That was poor wording, but you know what I mean. And he sliced her in half, and she was too scared to get back up because he was that overwhelmingly powerful. God damn, Zoro is a badass, man. I love him. He's my favorite character. I loved that moment. It was one of his most badass moments in the entire story. I loved it. Chef's kiss. I loved it. But my favorite moment in the arc, by far my favorite moment in the entire arc, is when Law is fighting Virgo and they have Doflamingo on the line. And Virgo is like getting all hockeyed up. His whole body is hockeyed up. And Doflamingo's like, you can't beat him. He has the strongest hockey basically in the entire world. Your little tricks aren't gonna work here. Your devil fruit power isn't strong enough. And then with one strike, Law cuts him in half, and not just him, the entire facility. And then he delivers one of the best monologues in the entirety of One Piece, where he talks about how all the emperors have been sitting on their asses, how the Navy has been doing nothing for 2 years, almost as if they've been waiting for something to happen. And Law says, I will get the gears turning. I will be the one to make it that nobody can sit on their asses anymore. That's not word for word, but close enough. That whole monologue, that whole moment, god damn. This random character who I knew almost nothing about. Law went from just like this side character who I'd met like a couple of times to like, he's like a top 10 character. Like, he is so cool, so badass. I want to know more about him. He is so enigmatic, and I loved seeing all his interactions with the Straw Hats where they're all super wacky and goofy and silly, and he's like pretty serious most of the time, and he's just like so baffled by everything they do. I love everything about his character so far. He is excellent. I cannot wait to find out more about him, and I'm sure I will in the next arc. So I'm so excited. So excited. 10 out of 10 character. Okay, I'm gonna wrap things up here by talking about the overarching story and all the things that we got introduced to us that are probably going to come up later. Like I said, Wano was brought up for the first time in a while. We obviously met Samurai Guy, who is actually from Wano, and we learned that there is something, at least with this character, that has to do with dragons, because he really doesn't like dragons, and he's really freaked out at the mention of dragons, and the fact that his son got turned into a dragon with his devil fruit power, like, shocked him. It was like this whole, like, he was freaking out, man, and I'm really interested because they describe Wano as this, like, closed-off society that, you know, is this country that is basically inaccessible, and, like, why, though? And, like, in the New World, especially, where all this crazy shit is going down, why does this country exist at all? Like, how does this country have closed borders, and how are they so closed off to everything that's going on? Because it was clear throughout this arc that this guy was totally unaware of a lot of modern developments, and he was very conservative about his beliefs with things. So I'm very interested to know more about Wano, and Oda specifically said, as I mentioned, he specifically said they're gonna go there, so I know I have that to anticipate, and I can't wait, man. I can't wait to get there, because Oda said he's been waiting to write it for a long time. And if that means anything to me, it's gonna be a 12 out of 10, because Oda doesn't miss. And if he's excited for it, I'm excited for it. Another thing that was mentioned, hardcore, was Kaido, who I believe I only heard his name like once or twice in the past. Once when they mentioned who the 4 emperors were, and once because, what's his face from Thriller Bark, God, I can't think of his name. Seven Warlord, who was at Thriller Bark, he said that he fought Kaido in the New World and was beaten by him. And then in this arc, they specifically mentioned that Kaido is called the strongest man on the planet, which is crazy considering the power scaling we've seen before. How fucking strong is this guy? We also had set up in the background this entire time is that the other supernovas, the worst generation of pirates, they are all forming an alliance also. And again, why? I don't know. There's so many questions that were brought up in this arc that I don't have any answers to yet, but they formed an alliance. They're clearly trying to do something. Maybe they're also trying to take down one of the 4 emperors, because that is Law's goal, and I don't know why that's his goal, but I am so curious, like, why are they forming an alliance, and why now? You know, what is the deal, and why with each other? I'm sure there's other people in the New World. So many questions. Also, Doflamingo was willing to just leave his seat as a warlord and to give up his throne of Dressrosa just at the possibility of Kaido coming down on his head, which is crazy. He must be, like, literally terrifying if Doflamingo is willing to up and leave at just at the possibility, because once he realized he was no longer going to be able to supply those synthetic devil fruits to Kaido, that's crazy. Unless Doflamingo has some plan up his sleeve, which I would not doubt, considering he seems like a very interesting villain. I don't know, but it's a very, like, whoa, holy shit moment for me. Also, Aokiji is back, which is awesome, and I can't wait to find out what his motivations are, because Doflamingo made a comment about this is a man who's made up his mind about something, and, like, where does his allegiance lie? What exactly are his goals now that he's not an admiral anymore? And I'm just so, like, dude, it just keeps coming back to that. There are so many questions, and God, I cannot wait. There's so many things in this arc specifically that were set up directly, you know, like so many things I'm really hoping in this next arc I'll get answers to. So God, that's another one. Like Aokiji he's back and I want to know more about him now. Last thing, and this is a really small thing that I could just be overthinking, but there was this mention when they were talking about the synthetic devil fruits where they mentioned the word bloodline elements. Might be nothing, might be something. I'm gonna go ahead and guess it's something because everything is purposeful in this story. That's just the first time I've heard of bloodline elements. I guess I'll find out. I'm gonna keep it just, tucked away in the back of my mind is that's something that was mentioned at some point. So maybe it'll be important, maybe it won't. Anyway, I can't think of anything else that I want to talk about right now. I've been sitting here for 35 minutes, basically talking the entire time, so I can't really bring up any more things that I really want to talk about. I know there's a ton that I'm, missing. There are certain points in the arc that I would like to talk about, but that I feel like this would just be so bloated as a video, so I'm not going to get to everything, but if there's something, super important that I missed, please comment it down below, because I know I missed some things in Fishman Island that people reminded me of in the comments, and I really appreciate that, because it's hard for me to keep track of everything. So yeah, let me know what you think about Punk Hazard, whether you're an old head or you're just reading it for the first time like me. Let me know what your thoughts and feelings are about it. I loved this arc. I think this is a top-notch One Piece arc, and it did so much in terms of setting up things for the story, and I always say this when I'm talking about One Piece, but I just cannot wait to see where it's going from here. So yeah, I'm gonna get started on Dressrosa. I did cheat a little bit. I looked up how long the arc is. It's 100 chapters, so I'm probably gonna make 2 videos on Dressrosa because I'm struggling with 50 chapters to remember everything that happened. It would be almost impossible with 100. So gonna split it up into 2 parts, so expect 2 videos on that. And yeah, I'm really excited. I'm gonna be just blowing through it probably at the damn near the same speed I just did Punk Hazard. So expect that soon. And until next time, I hope you're staying happy and healthy, and I hope that you're having a great autumn. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.